You ever wonder why racial inequality just sticks around? Even after all the progress made with civil rights. It's a huge question, and a lot of the time the answer gets stuck on individual attitudes, on prejudice. But what if it's bigger than that? What if it's not just about a bunch of people's bad opinions, but about an architecture, a whole system with all these interlocking parts, carefully built to get a certain result? Okay, let's dive in and really take a look at the blueprints of this whole structure. So the absolute foundation of this entire architecture, it has a name: anti-blackness. Now look at the wording here because it's really key. This isn't just about bias, it's a racialized condition, and this is the kicker, a cultural agreement. A cultural agreement. Think about that. It's like a society-wide unspoken rule that creates a hierarchy and positions blackness at the bottom. It's kind of like the quiet operating system running in the background of everything, shaping how our institutions work and what we expect from them. To really get our heads around this, let's use a powerful metaphor from Iris Marion Young's work. Picture a bird in a bird cage. If you just stare at one single wire, you'd think, well, why doesn't the bird just fly around it? It doesn't seem like much of a barrier, right? But as soon as you step back, you see the whole picture. That one wire is connected to hundreds of other wires. They're all systematically arranged, all interlocking, creating a prison that's impossible to get out of. That's structural racism. No single wire is the problem, but together, they're the cage. All right, so here's our game plan for this explainer. We've talked about the big idea of a system. Now, we're going to dig into the ideology, the blueprints, really. Then, we'll see how policy takes those ideas and crafts a public story. After that, we'll look at the very real consequences this idea of a new caste system. And finally, we'll ask, what would it even take to start unlearning this whole architecture? Okay, so every building starts with a plan, right? A set of blueprints. Well, for a system of social control, those blueprints are the ideologies. They're the ideas that reshape history itself to make inequality seem normal, natural, maybe even inevitable. The very first thing you have to do to build this kind of ideology is erase what was there before. This quote from American Holocaust just nails it. The official story, the approved history, always starts with what it calls a blotting out of knowledge. I mean, think about it. You can't really justify dominating a group of people if they have their own incredible history, their own culture, their own civilizations. So that knowledge just has to disappear. And this image shows you exactly where that blotting out so often takes place, in our schools, in the curriculum. The very tools that are supposed to enlighten us can actually become weapons of what this source calls cultural genocide. It's a system of ignoring, twisting, or just completely leaving out the histories and the contributions of Black and African people, creating a huge void where a real sense of identity and history should be. And this right here is the whole strategy in action. Just look at this contrast. The story that was created to justify slavery was that Africans were savages, that they needed saving. But the historical reality, the truth, we're talking about massive, thriving empires in Western Africa for centuries. So the claimed narrative wasn't just a simple mistake. No way. It was an invention, a story that had to be told to make a brutal system of economic exploitation look like some kind of noble civilizing mission. So you've got this ideology, this manufactured history, but how do you get it to jump from being just an idea to being, well, real life? The next step is policy. This is where those stories get baked into official reports, into public opinion, and where social science gets turned into a powerful tool for social control. So fast forward to the middle of the 20th century, and this incredibly influential document comes out, the Moynihan Report. Its main argument, and you see it right here in this quote, was that there was a tangle of pathology in Black communities, and it put the blame for inequality right on the weakness of the family structure. The effect of this was just massive. As the book Black Labor, White Wealth points out, this story gave the system a perfect alibi. All of a sudden, the problem wasn't hundreds of years of oppression or racist housing policies or economic exclusion. Nope. The problem was internal. It was another kind of blotting out, completely ignoring how slavery had systematically torn families apart for centuries, and then turning around and calling the consequences of that trauma an inherent flaw. And this whole narrative of blaming the victim, it became the rocket fuel for a brand new system of control. As Michelle Alexander breaks down in The New Jim Crow, when the old segregation system fell apart, there was a huge backlash, and politicians came up with this new, shiny, race-neutral language, law and order. They couldn't say segregation now, segregation forever anymore, so instead they said tough on crime. And that rhetoric, which was built on this idea of black pathology, paved the road for the next big system, mass incarceration. So what did this new system actually create? What are the consequences? Well, it's not just about more people in prisons. It's about building a whole new and very durable social hierarchy. And that gets us to the absolute core argument of the new Jim Crow. Mass incarceration isn't just a criminal justice policy that went a little too far. It functions as a modern racial caste system. It's a machine that takes a stigmatized group, a group defined mostly by race, and locks them into a permanent second-class status. And it does it not just by custom, but by law. And when you look at how it mirrors the old Jim Crow laws, it's just stunning. It's not even subtle. Once you're branded a felon, you can be legally discriminated against in all these critical parts of life. You can be turned down for a job, for housing, even be denied the right to vote. These are the modern-day wires of that birdcage, trapping millions of people in this state of being permanently on the margins. But here's a really crucial difference in how the system works now. The old systems, like slavery and Jim Crow, they were all about exploiting black labor. It was about making money off of people's work. Mass incarceration, though, its main function is to manage and warehouse a population that the new globalized economy often sees as, well, disposable. It's a huge shift from exploitation to just marginalization. And the scale of this warehousing is just hard to wrap your head around. At its peak, the number of people incarcerated in the United States went past 2 million. This isn't just a policy choice. It's a massive social event, and one that hits communities of color way, way harder than anyone else. Okay. So if we've diagnosed the problem as this massive, complicated system, this architecture, how in the world do you even begin to deconstruct it? The writer Thomas Merton offered a really interesting perspective on this. He said the job of an ally isn't to be a savior. It's to take on this prophetic task of diagnosis and criticism. The very first job is just to see the system for what it is, to find and name the injustice that's at the root of everything. It's all about understanding before you can even think about acting. And that idea of diagnosis leads us right to a more modern framework for what this work actually looks like. You see, it starts by seeing racism in all its forms, not just personal feelings, but sociological, legal, and cultural systems. From there, it moves to actually developing real strategies, building skills, and, this is huge, creating new policies. The whole idea is to consciously take apart the old architecture and start building something better in its place. It's about turning all of this knowledge into real action. But really, when you boil it all down, the sources are saying this isn't just about changing a few laws. It's about a deep, fundamental shift in our values. Thomas Merton, quoting Martin Luther King Jr., said, "We have to move from a thing-oriented society, one that's all about profit, property, and control, to a person-oriented society." He believed that a society that truly valued people first simply couldn't have a system this dehumanizing. Which leaves us with this final, really important question. None of these systems of racial control in America were accidents. They were designed, they were built, and when one fell, they were rebuilt over centuries. So if a system is a product of design, then it can be redesigned. The question for all of us is, what does that new design look like? And who needs to be at the table when we start drawing up the new blueprint?